David, first of all, oh my word, it felt like the wheels are falling apart at Real Madrid when they decided not to show up for the Ballon d'Or celebration. Do you mind just talking us through that? Why the protest, if it was one?
Yeah, absolutely. It was a timely distraction from something that happened at the weekend, but we'll get into that in a minute. That's just the cynic in me. Ballon d'Or ceremony this week, about say 24 hours beforehand or so. It gets leaked that Vinicius isn't going to win the Ballon d'Or. It's going to be going to Rodri. Cue mass hysteria in Madrid, in the Madrid media. Word starts getting out that they're angry to the extent that they're not going to send a delegation there, that none of their nominees, they had quite a few nominees, none of them were to travel. And there was an essential boycott of the awards from Real Madrid as a club, and quite a lot of the Spanish media bought into this and backed this. This all despite a Spanish player winning the award, and a Spanish player at that who had emerged as an incredible leader for the national team, and also as, quite frankly, the best midfielder in the world. And you'd think they'd be happy, but they were not. And they kind of, played into everything that Real Madrid were curdling up, I think, in terms of, this reaction to it. Players have come out now, Real Madrid players as well, supporting Vinny and such. And it's just been a huge campaign to create this noise. And like I say, it's quite timely after they were absolutely obliterated in the Clásico with one of the worst displays we've seen in years in that game from them.
I know you're itching to talk about that, but a word from you, Nicky, on this, first of all. It does seem as if Real Madrid lost the plot slightly because, of course, this protest or this boycott meant that they couldn't even celebrate their own coach getting Coach of the Year. What's going on?
Yeah, it's hilariously childish because, as you said, Ancelotti won Coach of the Year. Real Madrid also won Team of the Year at these awards. They had a delegation of 50 people that who were supposed to be going and cancelling all of that at the last moment. To me, it almost it feels like the father, because the Ballon d'Or is, let's be clear, the Ballon d'Or is nonsense. I think nobody should take the Ballon d'Or overly seriously. It has a real world impact for the player, right? So all top players have deals written into their boot contracts, for example, that would make them more money. They're also going to get all sorts of new sponsorship deals and general marketing tie-ins as a result of winning it. For sure, it has some real world impact. No one's denying that it's got something. But the actual process of choosing the awards, it's 100 journalists voting, all on whims and whatever other ideas they've got that cause them to vote a certain way. The criteria are very, very loose and applied with no consistency. Nobody should be taking this too seriously, which is why the whole thing is really just an event where football gets together and pats itself on the back a bit. And to me, it almost feels like it feels like you've got a wedding, because it feels like that sort of event. It's like a wedding, and someone has said to the father of the groom, no, you're still doing your speech, or you're the father of the bride, or the groom, doesn't matter either. You're doing your speech, but we're going to let the best man go last. And they've gone, well, I'm not doing it then. I'm leaving. I'm not having my speech at all. Like, it's that level of stupidity. Like, you're still getting 2 awards, one of which is literally for being the best team in the world. And you've said, no, we're not coming now.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the Ballon d'Or itself, I mean, come on, it's essentially the Valentine's Day of football awards. It actually doesn't exist. Valentine's Day is a Hallmark day. It's not an actual day. The Ballon d'Or, again, is just a strung-up event brought up by a magazine, and all this hysteria is created over it out of absolutely nowhere, and it doesn't really mean anything. And to see the pontificating and such around it this week has been quite something. I think a lot of people have lost their minds, and I don't just mean the people in Madrid.
Okay, you say that about Valentine's Day, but yeah, it's a nonsense till it comes around, and then you have to observe it like everybody else. You haven't got much choice about that. The Real Madrid, in their defence, have suggested, certainly to the Reuters news bureau, that it's the fact that Vinicius took a stance against racism that, of course, made international news in Spain that is behind, if you like, the snub by the Ballon d'Or to not award him the Player of the Year.
Yeah, this is perhaps worth mentioning just because we talked about it even on last week's podcast. Andy was saying that was one of the reasons why Vinicius for him should be the winner, is because if you look at the award criteria, and I said they're loose, they are loose, it's a few bullet points, but the criteria include individual performance for the previous season, team success, and player behaviour and fair play. And I think that was part of the argument for Vinicius. I'm certainly not going to shy away from the fact that last week on the show I said I thought he should win it. But I think that to use that as your justification for then boycotting the whole event, and for ignoring anything positive there might have been to say in Rodri's case, which I think there's plenty of positive to say in Rodri's case, and perhaps ignoring the fact that a lot of people weren't as good as they should have been at sticking up for Vinicius in the first place and making this case. So to suddenly make that your whole platform for being upset about it, I don't know, it feels a bit disingenuous to me.
You know, you could understand why somebody like Vinicius would think they're not ready for me yet. But it's such a tricky one because at the same time, you are disrespecting Rodri, aren't you, Nicky?
Yeah, I just want to say, this is where I come back to the whole thing is stupid. And when you look at the way the votes get made and journalists submitting their list of 5 names, and I think last year I was reading somewhere that last year Andrea Nana was on one of somebody's lists, that the names get there's not some shadowy cabal saying haha we're not going to let you win. It's groupthink done in a really not very structured way, and I've disagreed with plenty of them, even during this, the example, and I think this was because I was still quite early in my football journalism career, and it bothered me a lot at the time, that the Messi-Ronaldo duopoly over this award, it completely, I think, perhaps changed what it even meant to win this award, because I remember thinking in 2010, if we're just saying who we think the best player on the planet is right now, sure, you can make this case every single year. It's going to be one of Messi or Ronaldo while they were playing, really. But in 2010, Wesley Sneijder was the single most important player on an Inter team that won the treble, and he was the single most important player on a Dutch team that went to the World Cup final. To me, that was the beginning and end of the argument. If this award is seriously about being someone who stood out on their team and made the biggest difference their team and then doesn't win it. So to me, the argument hasn't been that for a long time. And yes, it is definitely a valid thing to point out that there is completely a lack of adequate representation in the list of award winners. But that is in huge part because 2 people won it over and over and over again, because people started viewing the award as, well, who's the best on the planet? And it was those 2 for a really long time.
As you've already hinted, David, this awards process was a convenient distraction from, I suppose, Real Madrid's problems on the field, particularly the weekend before.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there'd been some growing concerns for quite some time about Madrid, just about the way that they are structured, with the arrival of Mbappe and how they're kind of catering and adapting to him and his role. And of course, as well, the absence of Toni Kroos as well, which you can't play down. I think in this game it really came to the fore. I think we saw an attack isolated out there on their own without any connectivity between the midfield. A lot of guys running around looking to latch onto passes and to bring passes in, but they weren't there. And I think it was kind of exemplified as well by the lack of understanding with the midfield. Was just how many offsides that the Kylian Mbappe had was quite extraordinary. The tied for the most from anyone in La Liga in a single game, and it was remarkable to see this level of dysfunction that exemplified it, I thought, as well as how loose Real Madrid were when they lost the ball. There was always a free Barca player to capitalise on it, to break. And they've got a lot of pace in their team these days, Barcelona. So they were badly exposed. But there's been other games this season they could have been exposed as well. And there was one against Celta Vigo. I thought they were particularly poor, but Celta just didn't have the quality to undo them. Barcelona did, and they did so with aplomb. And they probably could have honestly scored maybe 7 or 8 if they really wanted to.
I don't know how much worse that would have been than losing 4-0, to be frank, Nicky. I mean, it's a really shocking result, isn't it, for Real Madrid? Not least against Barcelona, but I would have thought against anybody.
Yeah, it's the funny thing, though, isn't it, David? This fixture has thrown up a few Barcelona routes down the years. Since 2006, there's been 3-3-0s. There's been a 6-2. There's been a few wallopings for Madrid in this one, and it doesn't always end up meaning that much. Ancelotti, I think, pointing out afterwards, last time we lost 4-0 to Barcelona, we won La Liga and the Champions League. So it's not always as simple as saying this game went badly and it's the game everyone circles in their calendar and it was awful. Ancelotti, like, it's the conversation we always come back to. He's very good at neutralizing situations that seem bad. He's very good at leveling everyone out, and I think that was his role again this week in Madrid, and after the game pointing to the positives, which I think were not completely non-existent. Kylian Mbappe caught offside, I think, 8 times in this game. And it is one of those games where if those details had been better, maybe they score some goals and maybe the whole game plays out differently. And I do think part of the story here, to me, is not necessarily Mbappe is never going to fit at Madrid. He's still quite new there, and those things like timing that make all the difference when you're playing against the high line aren't quite where they need to be.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting how Ancelotti made the decision, I think, this season to try and speed up Real Madrid's football. It seems very quick, very rushed. You lose a player such as Toni Kroos, I guess you do lose that level of nuance. And I think that's what's missing. Just somebody to kind of interpret play better, to slow things down, to have the vision, to pull a game together. And they're missing that badly right now. I mean, you look at their non-penalty XG, I think it's about 1.4 at the moment. I think it was about 1.7, 1.8 last season. So it's slightly under. There's room for improvement there. And you would expect, with the attack that they have, that to have improved already and that to be higher. But it's not the case. It's actually lower.
Yeah. What about what Nicky said a moment ago about, Ancelotti saying that, well, we lost to them 4-0 and we still ended up winning the league. They're 6 points off the pace at the moment. Is there any likelihood that, well, obviously there's always a likelihood that they might catch up, but it feels unrealistic this season.
It's going to be tough, and the thing that they potentially look for will be, look, this is Flick's first year. A lot of the Barca team are young. They might look at that, but your counter to that could also be Barca's team it's largely still the same as last season. They're just a year older now, but still very, very young. So that could be the counter to that. So they may be hanging on Barca and the young players maybe not following through and seeing it out. It's still a very long season. There's distractions in Europe and such as well, so you don't know how that could impact Barca. Again, I think that Barca squad, don't get me wrong, talent there is absolutely fantastic. Real Madrid might be saying, look, if they get maybe a key injury here or there, say Yamal went down injured, would they have difficulty replacing him? How long is Rafinha's form going to keep up? Again, I'm just trying to encourage Madrid here and give them some hope, but they're just some ideas that could potentially occur. But right now at this stage, it's far too early to say it's over, even with this gap.
Yeah, and talking about the racism that Vinicius Jr has suffered over the course of the last couple of seasons. Unfortunately, it seems that some of that has been directed to at least one of Barcelona's younger players, Lamine Yamal. Yeah,
it appears Yamal, certainly it appeared on some of the footage that Yamal was racially abused by some supporters after scoring against Real Madrid in the Clásico. To Madrid's credit, they've said they've opened an investigation and plan to locate and identify the perpetrators of it. So important, I think, especially after perhaps making that something that was alluded to in the Ballon door conversation important that they walk the walk as well as talking the talk.